It is Victoria, but how much of a concern is that for you and for people in New South Wales?
Well, I think it should be a concern for everyone around the country. This is a wake-up call. It reminds us that this isn't over yet, that the last few months haven't been a bad dream, but this virus is still with us. And wherever there's a spike, wherever there's a hot spot, where we find people who've got the virus, you've got to stamp it out. That's what the Victorian government is trying to do here, and we should be supporting their efforts.
Yeah, so do you think that Daniel Andrews was right to sort of reintroduce those restrictions?
Look, I think our political leaders of all persuasions, Labor and Liberal, have done a good job around the country here. They've done a much better job than in other parts of the world, and largely that's because we've listened to medical advice. Our medical practitioners, our chief medical officers have told us what to do and how to do it, and part of that is to be able to take targeted local measures where there's evidence that people have got the virus to make sure that people aren't spreading it in the community. So I support the work the Victorian government's doing. I support the work that all governments across the country are doing to try and keep Australians safe.
I've certainly, from a personal point of view, noticed that many people have become complacent in recent weeks now that conditions have eased. I put this to the Health Minister a short time ago, and he's not going that far. But based on what you've been able to see in your own observations, Jason, have we become complacent? Not just becoming complacent, but have become complacent?
Oh, I think it's true, Pete, that life's getting back to normal, or life's getting back to the way in which we used to live. So you'd know, and everybody watching this would know, we're standing closer to our friends and family than we used to. We're probably shaking hands again. I've seen people shaking hands and give each other a cuddle. That's human nature. I'm not criticising that. But that's just, you know, we forget quickly. That's why I said this wasn't a bad dream. You know, this really happened. You see in the paper today, there's examples that the virus is still raging overseas. We've done the right things here, shut the border, we're containing the virus where we find it, but we shouldn't imagine for a second that this is over, and that's why I've said to you on many occasions, there is a risk of a second wave. The virus can spread very quickly unless we take action where we find it to stamp it out. And so the action that the government in Victoria is taking here is the right action to help protect people who live south of the border in Victoria, but people who live right across the country.
Well, I mean, does this energise Anastasia Palaszczuk's argument to keep the border in Queensland closed?
Well, look, you know, whether it's Queensland, Tasmania, South Australia or WA, I can understand why all of those premiers are being cautious here. But I'd say to you what I said 2 weeks ago, rather than having prime ministers and premiers arguing at each other on Sky News or on other forms of media, we've got a meeting of the National Cabinet on Friday. That's the forum that's worked over the last few months to try and tackle some of these tough issues, and it's the forum that we should use to try and sort out these border issues. I'd like to see the borders open as quickly and as safely as they possibly can. We're one country, but I also understand that premiers want to make sure that they do that in a way that doesn't increase the risk of the virus getting into their state in larger numbers.
Just a couple of quick ones before you go, Jason. This announcement, this decision that came down on Dyson Hayden that found he sexually harassed up to 6 women. So a lot of legal matters here, but have you got a view on that?
Well, over the last few years, we've seen examples overseas of men in powerful positions who've abused that power, who have abused that trust, and it seems like here's an example in Australia of that. There's not a much more powerful position in Australia than being a justice of the High Court. This is a pretty damning report. Can I congratulate the High Court and Susan Kiefel for the work that they have done here. They've apologised to the victims. It's a pretty brave thing for young women to stand up and tell the truth about what's happened here. But this has got a long way to go, Peter. I suspect we might see civil proceedings or maybe even a criminal investigation. So let's see where this goes next.
There are a lot of people who seem to suggest that he had a bias against Labor, particularly when it came to, you know, commissions that he was a commissioner for. Did you ever see that?
Look, this is not about the Labor Party or the Liberal Party. It's about sexual harassment. It's about proper behaviour in the workplace. And if you ask people in the legal fraternity, this was an open secret for a long, long time. It's taken a long time for this investigation to happen. But I congratulate the High Court, for the work that they have done and the leadership they have shown here. And once again, congratulate the bravery of the women who have come forward in this investigation.
Labor pushing for an inquiry into robo-debt, Jason. Do you think you'll get it?
Well, look, people died here. People died. Hundreds of thousands of people were sent bills in the mail for debts that they didn't owe the Commonwealth. And a couple of years ago, we were told this was an illegal scheme and the government kept implementing it. So we need a Royal Commission to get to the bottom of this, to find out the truth. How did it happen? And how do we make sure that something like this never happens again? That's the job of a Royal Commission, whether it's the Royal Commission into child abuse or the Commission of Inquiry into the Ruby Princess at the moment. These sorts of investigations are designed to find out what the hell happened and how do we make sure that this never happens again.
Just a last one, public housing. I mean, you've been pushing for this in recent weeks, and well, for a long time. But this, when it comes to public housing, it's a state issue, right? So do you have to put more pressure on the states as well as the federal government? Is that how you can achieve that?
Oh, look, this is a responsibility of the Commonwealth Government and the state governments. Like health and education, both help to fund these public assets. And ultimately, Pete, what I'm arguing for is action from the federal government to save the jobs of tens of thousands of tradies around the country. Carpenters, electricians, plumbers, bricklayers, the whole lot. Now, the housing industry is in crisis. Jobs are in free fall. The package that the government has put together is too small. And that's at a time where there's more than 100,000 public houses around the country that are in disrepair, full of mould, cracks in the roof, no carpet, a bunch of things that could be done. We could get tradies in there doing that work now, and we would save their jobs and build the sort of housing that Australians deserve.